With the rise of digital culture, the face of journalism has totally changed. Print newspapers have largely given way to online journalism, and young people are increasingly using social media to access news. I spoke to UCL students about how they get their news, whether their news consumption has changed during the pandemic, and how they feel about using social media as a news source.
It's mostly online. So like it's either social media and I'll just like see a link or like an interesting article headline, I'll click it, or it'll be like just me reading BBC News or something.
I do read the news, but not like I never read the newspaper. I read it like on the app or through Twitter.
I'd say I try at least once or twice a week I'll check maybe some headlines or scroll through, for example, like the news app on my phone.
I really like every morning as I am getting ready for the day and making my breakfast to listen to the news. I like on weekends to buy the newspaper, but in terms of day-to-day news and for actual like headlines, I'd say mostly digital news. So I have notifications on for like from my news apps. Even in this interview, I've seen on my phone I keep on getting news notifications, and probably in a few hours when my parents sit down to watch like the 7 o'clock news, they'll find out about these things, whereas I've seen them already.
Usually I use the BBC News app for like national news, and obviously the classic notifications that come through about coronavirus, etc. I use emails mainly for like global political news. So like I've signed up for like The Economist or Amnesty International, so that's more global stuff, or linked with what I'm interested in career-wise, like human rights, politics. And then I use social media for French and German news because I study French and German, so I follow their Instagram accounts. So mainly it's for like language practice and vocab, but also just to see what's happening. So yeah, I guess I use different medias for different things.
I listen to the news mainly, so every day I'll listen to the New York Times Daily, and then sometimes the Guardian's podcast.
As restrictions get tighter, cases increase and deaths mount, the news at the moment is often difficult to handle. Though news consumption at large has gone up during the pandemic, many people have begun to avoid the news, finding it too depressing. I asked the students where they stood on this.
I think I'm probably more in the latter camp, oh God, I can't bear to read it anymore. Although, like I said, I have still tried to keep up with news in general. I think even with other kind of big news things that have gone on, for example, Brexit, whilst I, with like news of the deal, of course, my interest peaked again, and I was, reading about, the new deal and blah, blah, blah. But I must admit that for the last however many years it's been going on, my interest has declined less and less and less.
I want to stay informed, and I do get that sense of like feeling a little bit of control by staying informed. But if I feel overwhelmed by it or something else is happening, then I definitely do block it off.
All of the students I spoke to said that they rely on social media for at least some of their news. Yet many of them said that they didn't always trust it as a news source.
I don't think I'd necessarily trust Twitter that much, but sometimes they do come up with, like Twitter will send actual notifications with the news, which is good, but I wouldn't really trust like someone just doing a tweet like, oh, this happened. When people have the tick as well, like a verification, you're like, oh, okay, maybe this will add to their credibility.
I think social media, the best thing about it is that it gets things out there really quickly, but that's also the worst thing about it, because obviously if there's a little thread of something that isn't true, it gets skewed, and just that's how it is. But then also if you look at it from a different perspective of things that don't make conventional news stories, that information that is able to spread, or maybe about protests, and like people are able to get information about what's happening that isn't being covered, but then also it's hard to verify, so it's hard to tell whether that's real or fake, or like, are these images of people getting beaten, is that the real story, and I think as long as people know that and are skeptical enough to not believe everything they see, then that's just the best way that you can navigate it.
The pandemic has seen a particular spotlight placed on fake news. From the spread of conspiracy theories to Donald Trump's voter fraud lies, social media has undoubtedly aided the circulation of misinformation. I asked the students whether they felt able to spot the difference between real and fake news online.
I feel like I'm probably just one of those people that falls into the trap just like any others. Like, obviously, I wouldn't be there thinking like, oh, the vaccine's gonna like put microchips in us, like whatever. But I think it's easy to just scroll and then get your eye caught by something like really easily and then fall into the trap of clicking on it and reading it and thinking like because now they've like planted that seed in your head.
Trump was tweeting, you know, oh, this election is false or whatever. I think there's a little bar beneath it that says, you know, sources show that Joe Biden has won the 2020 presidential election. In fact, on Instagram, they do actually have now on quite a lot of posts I see, the post, you scroll down, you see it's just kind of it's kind of blurred out, and it says fact checkers have checked this post and said it's false or whatever, and you have to kind of click I want to view it to actually look at it. I think the problem as well that it's very hard to talk about fake news and real news and facts when, you know, there's so many blurred lines in terms of people's opinions.
On Instagram, it is everywhere, and I think that it is an issue in terms of fake news. But it's not even like it's intentionally fake news, but some people might just interpret something differently or put their opinion as fact when they're posting something, or talk on behalf of other groups or like minority groups, and that can be an issue. But I do think in terms of fake news or just anything, I feel like if I see something that maybe I don't agree with straight up, or I'm not as educated or I'm quite ignorant on that front, I just try and Google it and read around that subject more, because I think it is quite easy just to take what you see online as fact and then like repost it.
Something that came up a lot in these discussions was Instagram. In a study by the Reuters Institute, Instagram was identified as the primary app on almost all of the phones of the young people they surveyed, commanding the most daily minutes. Instagram has become a source of news for many young people. You can scroll through your feed looking at pictures of people's dogs and their breakfasts, but also posts about politics, Brexit, Trump, and Black Lives Matter. Many of the students I spoke to mentioned Instagram infographics. These are artistic, digestible, slideshow-style educational posts that have grown in popularity recently, particularly since the resurgence of the BLM movement. While they are often a great way of educating people and spreading activism, they can also be problematic. Anyone can make one, and often sources aren't cited, statistics are taken out of context, and people's opinions are presented as fact.
It depends what it looks like, I feel like, on Instagram. Like if it looks like, I saw a post that was saying, oh, if you have this font and this colour and this layout, then people will just take it as like being like an educational sort of vibe rather than, and it's so interesting, it's so true. Like if I see that on my Explore page, I'll press that, like, oh, let's see this, and then read it. And it's so interesting like how it looks, it's how people perceive, or like how credible people think it is.
So I think the first time that I saw them, I was just shocked, and I just believed them completely at face value. And I think there is something a bit odd about them, because it's like a very pretty and like artistically assembled like news poster. So I think that kind of takes away some of the seriousness of them. But I think, I don't know, I assumed that they would be true, but I think anyone can do that, so it's so easy that they're fake. And yeah, sometimes there will be some followers I have who just, in terms of views and ideas, have very different ideas to me, and they would sometimes share some of those posts, and they would just have very different information and statistics to the ones that I was used to seeing.
When people share these Instagram things, they're so like, they're laid out so well and like easy for you to read that you're like, oh, like they've obviously done their research if they've got like this figure, figure. And I think also it's so easy, like when it came around to the US elections, like my flatmate reposted this thing on her story, and it turned out to be like it it was just some stats from like last election, but it was like, oh, the percentage of like women and males in each state voting or something like that. But she shared it, and then everyone was like, I just saw it and I was like, wow, like that's crazy. But then people just looked at it and they were like, oh, this is from 2016. So I think it's so easy to like just look at something like face value and be like, right, like that's the truth.
It's clear that the spread of fake or misleading news is a big concern for many young people. As social media platforms occupy an ever-increasing role in the distribution of information, many have called for them to be treated as publishers rather than just platforms, arguing that they need tighter regulation in order to prevent the spread of hate speech and misinformation. Twitter's permanent suspension of Donald Trump's account was, for many, a big move in the right direction, proving that social media platforms were stepping up in their efforts to tackle fake news and the incitement of violence online. However, many are also deeply concerned about powerful Silicon Valley billionaires like Jack Dorsey and Mark Zuckerberg having the power to regulate our speech.